Welcome to the Do Life Well podcast. Join your host, Gavin Merwin, and his guests as they explore the nature of doing life well. Now, let's dive in.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Do Life Well podcast. I am your host, Gavin Merwin. This morning, I am joined by Jarrett Johnson, who's a software developer at the Yoss platform, which is the firm we both work at. Obviously, the Do Life Well podcast is just a conglomeration of topics, mostly for men, based off of Proverbs 3, where we're instructed to just do life well. And today's episode, I'm excited to dive into AI. We've covered topics as health and wellness and men need to suffer, and future episodes are going to be around, wealth and just all the things that go into doing life well. But given our tech background and obviously the interest of most people, everybody's at least heard of AI. I thought it'd be fun to do an episode on that. So thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So take a second, introduce yourself, kind of what your background is. Most of it's obviously professional, what you're doing every day. Talk about what got you interested, I guess, in computers and AI and the whole bit, and then we can dive in and do what is AI.
Sure. So my name is Jarrett Johnson. Work with Gavin. A lot of my experience is kind of self-taught, although here recently it's become more professional. What's really gotten me into AI, it's really my hobbies. A lot of it was from it could be boiled down to a need for efficiency, where it's like, I have this game that I like, but there's a part of the game that I don't like. So I want to automate it, that way I don't have to do this. And it's like, I could build this big complex program, but I could also figure out how to make an AI to do it for me.
Sure.
And that's kind of where it started, where I just kind of explore random AIs. And it's like, I've always just had an interest in it, where it was like, the smart thing to do would be to make a complex program to do it for you.
Sure, yeah.
But my desire was to make an AI.
Okay.
So I explored different types of AIs, and I kind of deep dived into that field and learned what I needed to know. And that's pretty much how it started. And ever since then, I've just had a deep interest in how they work.
And now doing it every day.
Now I'm doing it every day.
And getting paid to do it.
That's right. That's right.
So like for the basic person doesn't know anything about, I won't necessarily say computers, but AI, like give a thumbnail definition and then maybe a little bit of history about it.
Sure. I think a good comparison of AI versus general software is general software. If you're trying to do something that wasn't coded into the program, then it won't work. It'll fail. It won't let you do it. Problems occur. Whereas in AI, you do something that it hasn't seen before, it has like a reaction engine. Like it can sit there and then like it make a decision on what you give it.
Sure.
So it can do things that it hasn't seen in the training data.
Sure. Well, and it's interesting, like, we have down later in the segment to talk about the future of AI and robotics, but I was listening to a podcast and it was like, if you have a humanoid robot in your kitchen and you want that humanoid robot to clean your kitchen for you, without AI, you're literally programming zeros and ones to tell it to move its arm this number of inches, turn this way, open this cabinet, take this out of the cabinet, put it there. I mean, you're literally having to program every single thing. Whereas like, again, futuristic AI, it's not there today probably. It's take a picture of a clean kitchen, give it to it, this is what it should look like, and then it can figure out how to fill in the details. Yeah. So like, for us professionally, obviously we're using it, right? So we get it. But just so listeners who may not be as familiar can understand the gravity. Because again, like when ChatGPT came out, I think most people have heard about AI, and all these companies are promoting it and all of that. But like outside of the marketing, in your mind, for society at large, what's the gravity of the AI revolution we're seeing?
Well, I have a little bit of a doom and gloom take, so I recognize that, and I'll set that aside, and we'll just focus on the not. But I feel like it's like the steam engine, whereas the steam engine come about and it amplified the amount of labor that could be done by this same workforce.
Sure.
And I feel that's the same thing with the AI. Either the AI can amplify you to do things that you would have never been able to do before, or things that would have taken you exponentially more time to do.
Yeah.
At least that's the form of the tools that we're seeing today with these GPTs. Yeah.
But what's I mean, like, because I do think there's some fear out there. So unpack a little bit the doom and gloom. I mean, what does that mean? You know what I mean?
So in the tech world, there's a few metrics that's kind of like memes, like jokes.
Sure.
One of them is called PDoom, and it's probability of doom by AI.
Okay.
Basically, we are creating our own extinction event.
Gotcha.
And it's like, it's a joke because it's like, hey, what's your PDoom percentage? And it's like, oh, you know, 60%. We're probably going to all die by AI, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, a thing that perfectly encapsulates it is something called Shaggoth.
Okay.
So a good way to imagine this is you have some Cthulhu Eldritch horror monster, and then you have a tiny little happy face put on it.
Okay.
So it's like behind it is all this random whatever, and then what you see is this happy little mask.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking to with ChatGPT. But behind the scenes, it's like we don't really know how it's coming to the certain conclusions that it comes to. And it's like we're basically, because of the rapid pace of this technology and because corporations are having to, there's basically a large war going on in the background right now. First company to hit AGI, you know, that's monumental.
Sure.
But because we don't really know that, and we're in like a rapid phase right now, it's like we're kind of growing these entities. Not that they're sentient, because they're certainly not. Not at this point. They're not sentient.
Meaning what?
That they have a goal or an objective, or they're self-aware. Like you could talk to it, and it would say, you know, you could make them say, "Oh, I'm self-aware," and you know this, that.
Sure.
But like, if you perform real academic tests and like you do research into it, you'll find that they're not.
Sure.
And they, yeah. But ultimately, we are just growing these things. We're just giving it the entire internet and then whipping it until it doesn't say bad things.
Sure.
And it's like reading into it. For example, with OpenAI, they were. I listened to an interview where someone was talking about how they train these models, and it's like they train it in checkpoints. It's like they get so far, and then they create a checkpoint. And then it's like they get a little bit further and the entire model just collapses and just stops and it just breaks. And then they have to go back to this checkpoint and do it again in a slightly different way. And it's like that's kind of very reminiscent of just growing this thing. And it's like it doesn't turn out how you want it, or it breaks. And it's like, well, let's go back and then try a different way.
Sure. But I mean, I think like too, like, I mean, obviously, I mean, personally, my PDoom score is pretty low because I feel like it's always, I don't know, like we talked about on a webinar we did for some of our clients, like farmers, you know, I forget what stat I used, but it was 100 years ago or the 1800s, whatever. And it's like 96% of the population were farmers and we were an agrarian society. And then comes along the steam engine and the tractor. And I mean, sure, there were similar fears then of like, no one's going to have any work and we're all going to, you know, it's going to put us out of business and extinction. And I mean, it did, obviously, like 2% of the population today farms, but obviously the world population's 10 times as much or whatever it is. And plenty of new jobs came out. And so like, is it like the fear from that perspective, or it's going to put us all out of work, or?
Well, yes and no.
Because I mean, I think you're a good example of that from the perspective of like, obviously in the software world, that's changing, you know, where it's like, if you're not amplifying yourself with these tools, you're becoming irrelevant. Like people can output. I mean, I don't know if I've even shared this with you. Our DevOps director told me since he started using Copilot, he's 30% more effective, which is funny because like, you know, we heard that stat like 6 months ago where they're like, yeah, 40% of the code on the internet's built by AI at this point. And you're like, how do I tap into that? And then he's literally telling you like, yeah, I'm about 30% more efficient, you know? So, but the same thing's true. I mean, like everybody's morphing into that. Now it's all you're doing. So it provided you a job, it didn't take one away. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know, I guess for people outside of the industry, putting some barometers around PDOOM and all that kind of stuff. Because I think like the general population, it's like, yeah, like if it's scary at all, I don't want to embrace it. I don't want to use it because I'm terrified of it.
Yeah. So as it is right now, as you mentioned, like if you're not using it, you're going to fall behind. Like if you have a law firm,
Yeah.
like two competing law firms, one begins to use GPTs to do everything with them. That one's going to vastly eclipse the other one.
Sure.
Like the amount of output, the amount of work, and the amount of things you can process just grows exponentially.
Yeah.
And if you're not using it, you're just going to fall behind.
Yeah.
Although, well, yeah, on that point, like with work, I code, but it's like most of the coding, like I'd say 80% is done by a co-pilot like ChatGPT. Like I just pull it up, I tell it what I want, I give it what I already have, and then it just, and then I take it and I slap it in there, and it works great.
Sure.
And yeah, 100% as a coder, like it's
But weave that with PDOOM.
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So right now, they're not like my PDOOM. Well, right now there's no risk of this, right? But we're starting to put them in robots now. We're starting to bring them into the physical world, and then my perspective, right? Kind of hesitant to say this,
Sure.
but when we achieve AGI, cognitively speaking, it'll be everything a human is, but more.
Yeah.
And it's like that. It instantly becomes like the superior organism,
Sure.
entity.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can we compete with a super intelligence?
Sure.
It's like a hive mind. You interact with one of them, every single one of them updates, and then it's like they all get better.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Well, and I guess that's what we're trying to figure out. Like, how do you harness that? You know, like I listened to a podcast the other day and the guy was like, the next 2-year window's it. You know what I'm saying? Like the next 12 to 24 months is the period by which like regulations have got to be figured out, who owns this stuff, you know, private business versus the public domain. And like, you know, because I mean, there's a lot of great uses even now. Like, you know, we've read a lot about like Khan Academy, and they're using AI to like, you know, educate kids in places where they have, you know, Elon Musk is giving them Starlink and Khan Academy's giving them, you know, an AI teacher, and they've got equally as good, if not better, of an education than kids here in the United States has, you know. But it's like, how does all that end up working itself out, I guess, around like ownership and profitability and regulations? And I guess that's your point, is it's like, short of that not being figured out, it could be potentially bad. The chances of that not being figured out, in my mind at least, are pretty slim.
so here's where my mind's at with that. Microsoft has basically infinite money.
Sure.
They can literally do whatever they want. For example, they're building. I think it's Arizona, right? I'm kind of spotty, but they're building a large data center, and I remember them talking about how they can't centralize their data centers in one state because it takes the power grid offline, and it's like that creates an issue because when you have them all spread out, then you have the added layer of logistics of like tying them all together to train these models.
Sure.
So basically, they're building a nuclear power plant out in the desert to power their data center. And it's like, holy crap,
Yeah.
Microsoft is building a nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
But, I mean, in that note, though, it's like they have infinite money. They don't care what the government says. I mean, to a certain degree, they have to, right? The government has a monopoly on violence.
Sure.
But when you have infinite money, I mean, you could figure out clever ways to hide what you're doing.
Sure.
And so it's a race behind the scenes. The first corporation to reach AGI,
Yeah.
like our entire internet infrastructure, everything, and a super intelligence could just blow right through it all.
Sure.
So I don't know what could happen, but I know the worst case scenario is it could just hack the entire everything.
Sure.
And it's like, how do you prevent that, right? When you make the super intelligence, how do you contain that?
Sure.
Right? We as humans have to outsmart a singularity.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know how that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because it's going to do things that we would have never in our lives anticipated was even possible.
Sure.
Like some of these exploits and hacks that like have come out recently in the past few months, it's just, the amount of jumps that they have to do and the amount of cleverness that is like incorporated in that, it's just wild to me. Like, I would have never thought of that. And then it's like an AI, a super intelligence, it's going to have a field day.
Yeah. So regulation for sure.
Yeah. I don't know, man. We have people in Congress who look at how they're regulating guns. I mean, you can argue that they're being malicious, but if you break it down, they have no clue about like what guns even are.
Sure.
And I feel like it's the same thing with AI. We have all these old boomers, and they don't know anything about AI. It's just scary, and they're like, just get rid of it, shut it down.
Sure.
But even then, it's like you know, Microsoft's not going to stop that. It's AGI. The amount of power that you can have, theoretically, that's a lot.
Sure.
So even if you do regulate that kind of stuff, it's still going to happen behind the scenes.
Sure.
But
and that's like a year out, maybe?
with AGI?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it depends. Right?
I'd say 2 years at the most. When AI starts improving itself, which it currently is, then it's just gonna skyrocket.
Sure.
Like Devin, right now Devin is the #1 contributor to its own source code.
Oh, wow.
So Devin is building itself right now.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of work on itself? No. I mean, like models. Like when you take a model and you allow it to rewrite its own foundational code, then that's when it's going to get kind of crazy. But I was reading about like some leaks from GPT-5 and everything, and basically they if the leaks are correct with QStar, what they've done is they have it where you give the model an input, right? And then it passes them into the layers and it translates them into numbers and it does whatever it does. But what they've done is they've added a new layer where it can think, where it generates these tokens, it self-reflects a few times, and it thinks before it generates an output. And that is, they were talking about, that's like a huge improvement.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't know, I think when they start rewriting themselves, that's when we're going to have like, give it a week and they'll be drastically better.
Sure. So for the everyday person using it today, so obviously like at some point we could talk even more about like the humanoid robots and Neuralink and all that kind of stuff. Hit on the future a little bit, obviously, with the whole AGI conversation and how do we deal with that, you know, technology, and is it net good, net bad, you know what I mean? But today at least, because I'm using it, obviously you're using it, you know, and you're like, hey, if you're not, you're falling behind, especially if your competitors are. So like, and I can give some examples too of how I'm using it, but like, how do I apply it? So like, hey, I hear a lot about AI. You've obviously given me a lot of information about what it is and what the future holds. Like, I'm in. How do I do that if I'm doing absolutely nothing today?
I'd say it depends on like your career field. But I mean, from like a standard baseline objective, you just have to have critical thinking to be able to identify ways that the AI can help you. Now, in terms of like a software engineer, I could build stuff to implement AI for me. Like if I went back to college, I'd build a massive elaborate program to have it just do my homework for me. Every day it'd check Banner Web or whatever we're using now, Blackboard.
Sure.
And it would just pull the new homework assignment, do it, and submit it.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't even. I just.
Is Josh doing that?
No, I told him he should. Yeah. but I mean that's an example. As a software engineer, I could just build that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think now.
I think if I know nothing though, right?
Perfect
it's like
example.
Download ChatGPT.
Yes.
Like
yes.
the app. Start
Download,
there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
ChatGPT. It's really the entirety of the human knowledge in an interactable form.
Sure.
So like anything you have an interest in, anything at all,
Yeah.
you can just start talking to ChatGPT about it. Like,
Yeah.
hey, tell me more about this. Oh, I don't understand that. Go into more detail about this. Oh, give me exact specifics on this.
Yeah.
You can learn just about anything
Yeah.
instantly.
Well, I mean, like this podcast is a good example. I was telling you before we started recording. So like, one, it wrote the outline. So we have this outline that we're kind of roughly following. And I'm like, here's the, intro of the show. Here's who I'm having and what I want to talk about. Give me an outline. last night. It took 3 seconds, and it spits out this great, nice outline with like thought processes. And then like from the technical side of it, I was telling you, the audio is recorded in like 48 gigahertz, and then my phone's camera was like 42 gigahertz, and so I'm like editing another one and they're not syncing up. So I'm literally like ChatGPT, and I'm like, I have a video that has audio and I have an audio that has just audio, and they're not syncing up. Can you give me reasons why? And it's like, you should check the sample rate, and you should check, you know, all these like more complex like videographer production type things I know a little bit about, but not, I know enough to ask the question and enough to implement the answer, but there's no way I knew the meat of the matter in the middle. And then it's like, what camera did you use? And I'm like, an iPhone 16 or 14 or whatever it is. And it's like, oh, it sometimes uses a variable frame rate, meaning like it's adjusting itself as it's videoing, which impacts the speed of the audio. Like it's milliseconds, but if you extrapolate it over an hour long audio, it gets off. And so that was a real example of me using it. And then even to the degree of like, okay, here's the video file, give me a transcript of it, pull out the most, you know, best 30-second clips so I can make little short clips. I mean, I'm just saying it's endless, like all in this one conversation for this one random topic. Has nothing to do with my career, nothing. It's just something fun we're doing.
Yeah. Like on that note, I use ChatGPT all the time. Like if I have anything that involves cognitive use, like I have to think about it, it's like ChatGPT is my co-pilot.
Yeah.
Like I'll pull it up, just say, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I want to do. Here's what I'm thinking about. Just talk to me about it.
Sure.
And it's like the perfect brainstorming partner. And like you said, it can bring things to your awareness to where it's like to help you answer or ask a better question.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, that's just phenomenal. I love that. It's like an assistant. You can just do anything but better.
And like another example is like, so from a work perspective, we send out this weekly AI newsletter. And so it goes out and it pulls articles from all these different places that our clients find interesting. It packages them together. It sends them. Well, then because we need Facebook posts, because I need blog posts, like you need all of these different mediums, they send me, hey, this was the most read article of the week. So there's like, I don't know, 6 or 8 articles, and they say this is the most read article. And it's a URL. I literally every week, it takes 5 minutes. Take that URL, I save me a prompt. So, you know, I did it once and then I just saved it. I'd literally just drop it in ChatGPT. Here's an example Facebook post that I like. Here's the new article, and here's the summary of it. Give me a Facebook post, enter. And it just cranks out another one. I copy it, I paste it into Facebook, I hit post. And then I say, great, now give me a blog post. It gives me a title, and it writes like a 3-page or, you know, however long on a screen blog post. I take that, put it on the website, post. And now, instead of having to write a Facebook post, come up with content, you know, and obviously you give credit to like the original article. Like if you didn't have the original article, you know, that's where your content's coming from. But still, just the ability to just save all that time, you know, and that's what you mean, like when you say 2 law firms, because it's like, I mean, I've done that before, you know, hey, I need a agreement to basically cover this, or like if we're doing a contract or something with a client and they want to customize something, I'm like, here's our original, here's kind of the gist of what I'm trying to accomplish, crank it out for me. And instead of having legal fees and paying an attorney to take a week and redraw it all up, it just gives me this nice little paragraph, and then I can tweak it. And it's not always perfect. I mean, you have to like give it additional context and stuff, but which, I mean, I guess too, we both have the pro accounts. How is the free account now? Do you know? Like, is it to the point where it can do most of this too?
I mean, it's gotten better, but ultimately it's like the context window is very restrictive along with the context output. Like it's pretty good for like very simple things.
Like, could it have done just what I just gave, those 3 examples? Probably not.
The blog posts and stuff, yeah, but you would have had to hold its hand a lot more.
Yeah.
Like you would have had to add probably a few more like qualifiers and conditions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But and maybe another example, I don't know. But ultimately, I don't use the free one at all unless I'm doing something basic. Like take this list of items and then format it like this for me. It can do that, and even then, I have to double check it because it might drop one.
Sure.
Yeah.
What are other tools like image creation? Because I know like most of those are in baked now, but
Sora is a great example. OpenAI recently released that. Well, I
is that
say
out? Is that
released,
out?
but it's not
Oh,
not
okay,
like
yeah, I gotcha, I
available.
gotcha.
Yeah. But like I've seen some of the stuff that it can do, and it generates videos, like short videos. Like you give it, obviously you give it a prompt, right, and then it'll generate it. But it's like the quality of these videos now, I can't tell anymore. Like the entire time, I've always been able to tell. There's a subtle thing right here. I could tell immediately that's an AI.
Yeah.
But with Sora, it's like I don't know how to tell anymore.
Sure.
Like if you give me a large enough sample size, I'm sure one or two of them, like a few of them, I
Yeah.
could be like, oh, here's a problem.
Sure.
But ultimately, you can't. Unless
Which, I mean, it's like, obviously it was for compensation too, but that's like the biggest reason Hollywood was on strike. Not around compensation. It's mostly around AI use. And, again, like I think as a society, we're just grappling with like, how do you use this technology? And, I even heard on a podcast, and I haven't done it yet, but I need to, but getting like a code phrase with your family members to know if it's you or not. Like,
that's smart.
because of this, technology. I mean, because I think it's how long of voice do you need to recreate it?
Oh, like a 10-second, 15. Yeah, no, it's super short.
So literally I could take this episode and all the audio of you and then
I could call your mom and I could say, hey, I'm stuck on the side of the road.
Kidnapped and I need you to wire $1,000 or whatever, and it
Exactly.
sound just like me.
Yeah.
And with Sora, I guess even look like me.
Yeah.
You could even send a video.
Literally.
So, and again, like I'm more on the positive end of it, to where it's like, don't be scared of that. Like we're just gonna have to adapt.
Exactly.
From the perspective
Yeah.
of like the technology's coming, and there's gonna be vastly more positive things, I think, for the world. Like again, Starlink internet and Khan Academy educating kids in these remote places. Like that's not possible without it. The downside is, bad actors can rip people off with it. But as simple as just with your family having a code phrase of like, hey, if I'm asking you something crazy, like just ask me something only, it's funny because I think of the Harry Potter episode or I forget which movie it is. I think it's the 7th one. But anyway, they're all like looking like Harry in different ones. And then they're like holding their wands to each other, asking them stuff that only they would know. Like, where did we first meet this person together 10 years ago or something like that, and then they're like, oh, this place. Okay, I had to be sure it was actually you. And it's like Harry Potter showed that, I don't know, 10 years ago. But now it's like we're going to have to live with that, at least
Like it's
digitally.
real.
Like you're going to just have a phrase or a word or whatever. And like if something, like my wife calls me and she's asking me something crazy, I'm just be like, yeah, what's her phrase? You know what I mean? And if she doesn't pass, then you're a scammer. You're not getting me,
And on that note, like Sora and I think right now they're it's been like a few months since I've seen this, but they were discussing, I say they, but like the engineers and stuff were discussing ways to like fingerprint AI work. So like an image
Sure.
is generated by an AI, there's hidden information that you can see, hey, this is an AI generated image.
Sure.
But it's like on that note, you could also strip that information.
Yeah.
And then it's like now it's just
Which, I mean, I guess that goes back into like some type of regulation,
Yeah.
even if it's self-imposed, meaning like
Yes.
in the industry itself, you know what I mean? Because I get the fact like regulations typically are always going to fall behind. I remember like when drones became super popular, I was into that. Me and Jess did videography, like we did weddings and I did real estate. So I bought a drone and I'm literally out there flying it. And then it was like literally 2 years later, maybe the FAA's like, hey, if you charge people for this service, you've got to come to pass a test. It wasn't like pilot's license, but it was in that realm of like, you have to understand basic airspace maps and know where you can and can't fly. Well, then they embedded it into the software itself. So like DJI was the company of the drone I had. First one I had, like it had none of that. But like the third or fourth one I had, literally the GPS itself, like, I'm flying around Moody, unintentionally. Like there was this house I was videoing down there and it was like an invisible wall. I mean, it was just flying along, boom, you can't enter this airspace. And so my point is like, that was something they had to work through, because prior to that, I mean, you just fly right over Moody, unintentionally, not even meaning to get in their airspace because you don't know, you're not a pilot, but the regulations lagged behind it was my point. And then so they were kind of like, all right, hey, you got to get this basic license to do this if you're going to charge. That's going to weed out the vast majority of people because they're not going to be willing to do it. And then B, we're going to get the software company to put in these barriers or boundaries to not restrict you like in we're not going to ban it, but we're going to have some parameters here. And I think you're going to see something similar. Like, I mean, you're going to have to, like a fingerprint or a watermark or something like that that's on these type images and things.
And luckily, like if we look at what Sam Altman's saying, he's real big on like implementing some form of regulation.
Yeah.
And it's like they're doing a pretty good job at not releasing these models until they're ready for the general public.
Sure.
And it's like internally they have the wild version of the model that just does whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, by the time they release it, they have some form of safety and ethics and like regulation or whatever implemented into it.
Yeah.
Because it's like the way they see it is if we don't regulate ourselves, then the government's going to do it for us.
Yeah.
And it's like if
and then
we
it's
can,
going to be very inefficient. And
yes, exactly. Yeah.
more
if we can do
restrictive.
it,
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, it won't be as bad
Yeah.
if they do it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what all these big AI companies are doing.
Yeah.
And it's like, honestly, it's kind of encouraging to see that because it's like knowing human nature.
Yeah.
You know, when you get that high up in like power and money and everything,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, that's awesome that we're doing that.
Yeah. There we go. There's some positive.
Yes.
Not doom and gloom.
Yes. Yes. So maybe there's a chance.
Yeah. Other tools that I use personally, one is called Motion. I know we talked about that on our webinar, but it's a scheduling software. Again, it's paid, but it's cool because it's like it takes my to-do list, merges it with my calendar, and then it books for me. And then I have a scheduling page, kind of like Calendly or those out there where people can book you. But that's an AI tool I use. I know a lot of our guys use, me included, Fathom. Records your Zoom meetings, and it's gotten phenomenal. And that's what's cool to me is it's like, we were fortunate in that we were really early adopters to a lot of this stuff here. But it's like you start using these tools and now you're seeing these like rapid enhancements on it. Like our implementation team used to spend so much time like after a meeting like typing up these emails and here's what I'm going to do, here's what you're going to do, here's our next call, doing this whole thing. Fathom literally does it for them. I mean, it's like you have a Zoom meeting, you have a conversation, it's taking notes, it gives you a transcription, and then he literally just copy pastes, puts it in an email and sends it. Like, it's amazing, and it's like all those tools are getting better. So that's a couple more, I guess, if you're listening, you could use Fathom, Motion. ChatGPT is the biggest one, And I mean, like, even like personal stuff, like here's a workout, bust it up however you want. I'll put it in there and like, what's the most efficient way to crank this out, or like I went on a hike and it literally was able to access the internet. I was like, I'm going to Pine Mountain and I'm starting here, or no, I don't even think I told it that. I was just like, here's how much I'm going for 2 days. I'm hiking 2 days. Here's my fitness level. What should I do? And it literally like went out and researched the map and the trails, all that. And was like, I would start here, hike this many days, camp here, go this, hike this. You may consider this. And I'm like, great. What else is in the area to see before and after? And it gave me a list of those. So, I mean, it's just endless if you know how to ask the question. And that's what you started with that. Like, you got to be able to critically think.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And give like some tips on like prompt engineering.
Really, I feel like prompt engineering just you just have to have a mind for it. I mean, you can develop the thought process, but it's like ultimately you just have to be very clear in your instructions.
Sure.
It's like you have I think the best way to describe it is you're talking to an entity that knows a lot and it can do a lot, but it doesn't have common sense.
Sure.
So it's like to some degree you have to outline everything.
Well, it's like when you have a conversation with a person, they have a lifetime of context. And this model, I mean, this doesn't.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it doesn't, you can't take for granted just because it has access to the entire internet that in this specific interaction, it's pulling on that. Like it's pulling on what you ask for it to pull on. And so a lot of times like it's missing that context. So you have to take time to like really, it's funny because we were looking something up, or me and my wife were talking about something. I'm like, hey, hang on a second. And she's like, how do you talk like this all day long? Like I'd lose my mind if I had to like lay all this stuff out. I'm like, yeah, it's a little more work on the front end, but if you'll do it, it can just crank out all this great information. If you don't, it's going to aggravate you because it's going to miss stuff or ask too many questions or whatever.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
So, what do you think about robots and robotics? And it's funny. Like me and Chris were talking about living simple lives. I'm like, hey, I'm for that. I really am. But I also would love a Neuralink in my brain. I mean, people think it's like Mark of the Beast and all that. I get all that, but it's just the efficiency thing for me. Like to be able to have like all the moms are gonna absolutely hate this, but I'm thinking like if I had a robot at home that could like bounce Collins, our baby, whenever she was fussy, like I could keep doing my chores and it just console the baby. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
clean the house, do the dishes, and like for me, like honestly, like I mean, I'm kind of somewhat joking with the Neuralink thing, but it's like just not having to translate from my thought to my phone. Like it just remind me to do whatever. It just does it. Like literally last night, I'm no joke doing the dishes, and a thought hits my brain of something I need to tell somebody. But it's like if I don't stop right now, pull up my phone, open Slack, send it to them, I'm gonna forget probably. But I'm like, if that technology was in my head, in front of me and yeah, or even it just do it for me.
Yeah,
if it was literally in my head, it was just like, hey, would you like me to send so and so a message? Like, absolutely, I would. Not even have to say it, just think it. Like.
So I have a few comments on that. Actually,
all right, yeah.
Remind me, the Dream AI. That's pretty sick.
Okay.
But in terms of robotics and everything, so take out the doom and gloom.
Sure.
Because there's a lot there.
Yeah.
But take that out. That would be awesome.
Sure.
I would love that.
Yeah.
And it's like, have like an Android walking around and you can just tell it, hey, go do this for me real quick. Or like, bro, you're sitting on the couch and the remote's over there and you're just like, hey, come here.
But is it like WALL-E though? The movie WALL-E, like where they all get really fat and lazy and they just glide around in their chairs because the computer
pick me up and take me to my bed.
Yeah. I mean, there's that aspect of it too, where it's like, we do need to do something. You know what I mean? Like,
there's also like a in that vein, I forget what it's called. There's a specific terminology for it, but like knowledge gaps. How it's like people can get overly reliant on these GPTs, and it's like they don't learn the in between. They just say, hey, give me the end result.
Sure.
And it's like you don't really know. A perfect example I saw was you have an objective at point A and the destination at point B, and going through you have these giant holes, and it's like they represent knowledge gaps. But with GPT, it's like a bridge, and it's like if you just go across, then you never fill in these holes.
Yeah.
So really,
you're always relying on it.
Yes. And it's like you get to the point where it's like, I'm in too deep, I need to constantly use it.
Sure.
But it's like really what you should be doing is filling in the holes with the GPT instead of just covering it.
Yeah.
So that's a very important thing.
So Dream AI.
Oh yeah. So the Dream AI, they created this AI that could scan your brain as you were dreaming and then map it to video.
Oh wow.
So you can literally see what people are dreaming.
That's cool.
That is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I love that. But
yeah, I mean, even think of that from like a spiritual context, like the Lord speaking to us through dreams. I mean, that takes that to a whole nother level. Like, you don't even have to wake up and write it down. You know what I mean? Like,
you can just wake up and hit play.
Hit playback. Like, let's see what last night was about, Like, is any of that spiritual or not? Or is it just what I had for dinner, Like, that is cool. So, big world out there. A lot of exciting things. I'm going to be optimistic about it, not be gloomy. So, maybe you will be too. Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. I just have faith in us. We're going to figure it out.
Well, one way or another, yeah.
And we're going to embrace the technology and figure out a way to use it.
There might be a bit of a rough patch.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Not like WALL-E.
Not quite like WALL-E. No.
Well, anyway, this has been fun. You have anything else you want to share?
No, there was another idea that hit me, something about latent spaces, but I think we're going to pass that point now. No, I think I'm good.
Sweet. Well, hey, hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time.
Thank you for joining us on the Do Life Well podcast, where we explore topics like fatherhood, business, health, wellness, and so much more. With each episode, we aim to inspire and guide you in embracing the art of doing life well. If you found value in today's conversation, please leave us a review, subscribe, and share with your friends. Until next time, continue the journey of doing life well.